Please welcome your 2014 convention speaker, Dr. Carol Johnson.
Good afternoon, and let me begin by acknowledging the most important people here today, the graduating class of 2014. Today, we come together to celebrate the women and men who are the scholars and achievers, our intelligent and capable graduates who chose to dedicate their life's work to education and who represent our community's best hope for a better tomorrow. Congratulations, your parents are so proud. This is a glorious day of celebration, and you've worked hard, and this is a day you and we hoped would arrive. We also salute and extend our deepest gratitude to the many who have joined us today, those that nurtured and taught you, stood with you through difficult moments, to your family, friends, and teachers who have remained steadfast even when the journey seemed tougher than expected. Let me acknowledge the faculty and staff at Boston University's School of Education, and especially the leadership and dedication of Boston University's President Brown, who over several decades has blessed many of our BPS graduates with scholarship support to attend this great university. Time does not permit me to acknowledge or call by name each of the individual faculty members who have contributed to our work, but please know that we're grateful to all of you. I will take a moment, however, to acknowledge Dean Harton Coleman. It has been his leadership and commitment to education for all that has led him to reach out beyond the walls of Boston University to respond to the needs in our community, to promote learning in our turnaround schools like the Trotter and Roxbury, to bring Boston University's expertise to our Step-Up program, and provide Boston Public Schools with extraordinary teachers and leaders who every single day make a difference in our classrooms and in the lives of so many of our children. Last year, Dean Coleman chaired the Boston Public Schools Student Assignment and Choice Task Force, helped us redefine school choice, and most recently, he was appointed to serve a 4-year term on the Boston School Committee. On behalf of Boston's families, Dean Coleman, we thank Boston University and you for bringing the best of Boston University's expertise and talents to our students. We especially thank those of you who have spent time in our classrooms. We know that you've made a difference. While I do speak fairly often, each time I stand before an audience, I'm reminded of two things. First, how fortunate I am to have had so many different individuals in my life over time who contributed to my growth and learning, and whose spirits and wisdom are integrated into my very being. These women and men have guided my development and opened doors for me that otherwise might not be available. Secondly, whenever I speak, no matter that I've spoken many times before, I always feel a nervous knot in my throat. When I do, I'm reminded of the words of Minnesota State Legislator Mi Mua, who was the first Southeast Asian monk to ever be elected to a legislative seat in America, who shared with me what her grandmother told her. The knot you feel in your throat represents the voices of all of your ancestors who for so many generations had no voice. The knot you feel today and each time you speak compels you to give voice to those who have come before you so that their voices are indeed heard. I am an unlikely Boston University graduation speaker and an unlikely person to be superintendent of the Boston Public Schools. The great-great-granddaughter of slaves, I grew up in the segregated South. I saw firsthand how poverty, unequal opportunity, and discriminatory practices could limit human potential. I often read from obsolete textbooks that had been discarded from the white schools in our town. I knew, as did my older siblings, that we could not visit the park, swim in the pool, eat in local restaurants, and sit in other than our assigned seats in the movie theater. I remember on very hot days being thirsty, but having to walk past water fountains that were painted white only. I remember our choir traveling to concerts and having to know in advance where we could stop for dinner or where blacks might not be served. And I remember my dear grandmother, finally over the age of 60, feeling that it was safe enough to vote. Fortunately, these were not my only memories. And as evidence of this great nation of opportunity, that change can occur, and can occur pretty rapidly. My sister, who is only 10 years younger than I am, had absolutely none of these experiences. The community I grew up in had limited resources, but I was blessed with wonderful parents, involved grandparents, teachers, and a church family who all believed in the transformative power of education. I remember loving to read powerful biographies of extraordinary individuals who, despite their hardships, had overcome enormous odds. Harriet Tubman, an abolitionist and humanitarian who risked her life through the Underground Railroad to free hundreds of slaves. Or Marian Anderson, a brilliant vocalist who was denied the opportunity to perform in Constitution Hall by the Daughters of the American Revolution, but who was befriended by the good-hearted First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and invited to sing at the Lincoln Memorial to a crowd of over 75,000. She went on to become the first Black person to perform at the Metropolitan Opera, to serve as a United States delegate and Goodwill ambassador. I enjoyed these stories because these individuals did not waste time bemoaning their plight or lack of resources. Neither did they sit on the sidelines and expect others to carry their torch. They courageously continued their quest in spite of what they faced. Their stories and being surrounded by a loving family and a caring community gave me a thirst for knowledge and an expectation to graduate from college and the drive to succeed. I was fortunate to attend an all-girls Catholic high school where I was exposed to Latin and literature, arts and opera, and where chemistry and character were considered equally essential. These past few weeks, with the kidnapping of over 200 girls in Nigeria, we were once again reminded that while parents may sacrifice greatly for their children, as many of you have done today, to get an education, this gift is not available to all and is more precious and fragile than we ever imagined. I offer these glimpses of my memories and our history not to relive the past, but to remind us all of how far we have come as a nation and to also recognize the leadership and community commitments that were necessary then and are needed now for all of our nation's students and others across the globe, regardless of their race or income, their language or religion, their family background or circumstance, to get the best education possible. I have taught and worked in public education across this nation for over 30 years. I have watched education time and time again overcome the conditions of poverty and family circumstance. Last year, I met Nakia Elise, one of 7 children in her family from an American Indian tribe in Connecticut. She graduated from the Urban Science Academy in Boston, was recognized as their 2013 valedictorian, and she earned a full scholarship to Boston University. Last night, I congratulated Alyssa Sarkis, a BPS graduate and who is graduating today, planning to be a great math teacher somewhere in this nation. And in just a few weeks, Cassandra Green, this year's valedictorian, whose family arrived from Haiti, will study biology, again getting a scholarship from Boston University. I have watched students who have never seen a French horn or heard a cello learn the joy of music and perform with fluency and confidence as if they were going to be introduced on stage tomorrow. I've watched science and technology teachers help students learn robotics, debate ideas, build and experiment, and inspire creativity. I know we are making a difference, and so is Boston University. But there are significant demographic shifts occurring in the United States. America is growing, and the youngest generations are projected to be more diverse. Middle and upper income whites are moving back to the cities, but not necessarily with children. The suburbs are increasingly becoming destinations for immigrants and low-income families. Over the last decade, the overall population in America grew by almost 10%, but Americans' Hispanic and Asian populations grew by 43% each. This fall, as students enter into our classrooms, white students for the first time in our nation's history will make up less than half of all of the enrollment in America's public schools. Today, the majority of American children under the age of 1 are children of color, and by 2020, the majority of youth in this country will be students of color. Given these shifts, we must work more aggressively to educate not just some of our children, but all of them. Diplomas Counts reports that America's 2010 four-year high school graduation rates are at an all-time high in this nation, the highest in 40 years, at 75%. This average rate varies by geography and race, with Vermont, the state with the highest, at 85%, and the District of Columbia at 57%. For Asian and white students, the four-year graduation rates are 81% and 80% respectively. For blacks, the graduation rates are 62%, for Latinos, 68%, and the lowest for Native Americans at 51%. The clock is ticking. These rates are no longer acceptable or sustainable for us as a nation. The Center for American Progress suggests that ensuring a robust and sustainable economy is only possible if we as a nation maximize the human talent represented by these changes. Equity, inclusion, and fairness are no longer moral imperatives, they are economic ones. When any nation undereducates, underdevelops, underinvests, and underutilizes the talents and potential of any group, it threatens its own economic prosperity and community well-being. Too many students across this nation are not achieving in ways that will ensure that they will be successful and productive citizens that this nation needs. While many of the overt vestiges of discrimination have disappeared, there is evidence that many of the children we educate in the urban and rural communities throughout this nation will not enjoy liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Many of the children we serve today in our urban schools throughout this nation live with families with incomes below the poverty level. These households are also filled with children who have hopes and dreams, who desperately want to learn, and who have aspirations for a better life. They and their families want what we all want. In 1901, John Dewey said, "What the best and wisest parent wants for his own child, that we must want for all of America's children." Today, our worlds may survive separate and unequal, but the interdependent globe that our children will inherit will force us to work together in the universe of the common good. We will no longer be able to allow some of us to consume excessive resources at the expense of others lacking what are the basic conditions for citizenship and freedom: a quality education, clean air and water, a safe place to live, health care and employment that yields a living wage. We have created structures to divide us, not connect us, and we must now, as author Daniel Pink asserts, design a small planet to be a better place for all of us. We must teach every single child as if they may have the potential to bring peace to the world, cure cancer and heart disease, put a human station on Mars, guide us spiritually, develop renewable sources of energy, or just teach us something we may never have imagined needing to know. Our favorite son and former President John F. Kennedy said in 1961, "Our nation's progress can be no swifter than our educational progress. Our requirements for world leadership, our hope for economic growth, and the demands of citizenship itself in an era such as this all require the maximum development of every young person's capacity. The human mind," he said, "is America's fundamental resource." This year, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer, where people lost their lives to promote voter registration in the South, and 60 years ago today, this day, May 17, 1954, the United States Supreme Court handed down the landmark decision in Brown v. the Board of Education, a case that was also helped to be argued by our own father of Dean Coleman. Despite the optimism of later Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall that full integration would take place within 5 years, access to a quality education still eludes too many of our children. The good news is we know more today about what it will take than we knew in 1954. You are graduating at an absolutely powerful time in public education. We are exploring new and better ways to support teaching, new technologies to personalize, new data and assessment tools are being created to guide you, and we are learning to connect the dots between academic, non-cognitive skills, and we're embarking on innovative learning theories that blend education, how the brain works, and neuroscience research. We do know what it takes to produce the best schools and what investments are necessary to close the achievement gaps. Our children must have a good and early start. We also know that this is not solo work. This is not the work of a single teacher, but our children being taught consistently from grade to grade by a series and a team of competent and caring educators committed to the success of not just some, but all. We know what it takes, and we know that school leaders have to be accountable, but also have to inspire others to do more than they might otherwise choose to do. In the most successful performing countries in the world, their educators, their teachers are held in high esteem. We must rebuild the esteem of America's great servant teachers and leaders in every single neighborhood across this country and give our teachers the freedom and flexibility to teach well. We know that schools cannot do this heavy lifting alone, particularly in our poorest communities, and families must own their share of the effort. When a newscaster recently asked the mom of Kevin Durant, the MVP Oklahoma Thunder's player, how she was able as a single mom to raise a successful African-American male given today's challenges, she responded, it was simple. I was always there. I knew their teachers. I checked on their friends, and I knew where they were. Our children need their families involved, but they also need a supportive, nonprofit, faith, philanthropic, and corporate community of leaders that understand that the success of our nations rests in the education of our children. We as a community must address the issues of hunger, stable housing, healthcare, and employment, the basic needs that threaten the very well-being of our children and their families and the educational outcomes we seek to achieve. Those of you who are here today, our graduates, are fortunate and privileged. We have choices and options in our lives because of our education. Today is not about looking back. Instead, this ceremony marks the beginning of the next chapter in your lives, so you should be looking forward. You have been given the gift of an education, a gift no one can take away from you, but a gift that expects much in return. Those of you in this room today are our best hope of closing the persistent achievement gaps that threaten our nation's prosperity and well-being. You are graduating from one of the best higher education institutions in the world. You have accomplished much to be here, and others have made significant investments in your future. You have the best seats in the House to turn failure into success, mediocrity into excellence, and inequality into opportunity for all. You have within your reach and within your power to change the course of actions that have resulted in some of our students succeeding and others failing. This is nothing short of saving America. Today, in order for America to succeed, we need your hearts and minds, your hands and your voices. There are not other leaders who will do this work you were created to do, and it will not be other graduates who will serve your unique purpose. We must waste no time, we must lose no more minds, we must each act and all work collectively. So today I challenge you to choose to participate. First, you cannot be silent. The days of going in your classroom and shutting the door are over. Your leadership voice is what is required, not to defend the status quo, but to question whether the practices and actions being taken actually support our children and their well-being. Secondly, you must recognize that schools cannot do this work alone. You must list and value partnerships and make your work as important to them as it is to you. Our children cannot be invisible to those who control the policies, resources, and decisions that directly impact their lives. This also means that we as educators cannot be absent. You must be present also and find ways to communicate how others can contribute and how absolutely essential their involvement is to this enterprise. Not all of you will come to work for Boston Public Schools, although I hope that many of you will, and we need to work on that, Dean Coleman. But wherever you go, wherever you serve, we hope you will seek to make educational opportunity available to all. Let me end my remarks with a quote from a special Boston University alum, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who in the March for Integrated Schools in 1959 said this: "Make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a better person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in." Thank you and congratulations, class of 2014.